So in my last video, I discussed the importance of correctly sequencing your commanders in Siege of Winterfell due to the ordering of you picking those commanders affecting how often their active abilities end up being cast in practice. So in this video, I'm going to do a tier list of all the active abilities available in Siege of Winterfell, just so there is a visual frame of reference out there to allow people to refer to, and hopefully that can help some people out there in regards to performing their best in Siege of Winterfell, which, if you've searched this video out, I assume you are looking to do. So first of all, in terms of the best active abilities in Siege of Winterfell, Daenerys sits alone at the top. She has 6,000% damage coefficient on her scaling. The only thing close to that is Marjorie, I find her, who has 4,300% total scaling. Both of them hit a maximum of 5 targets, so the damage or healing in Marjorie's case is split. But the next closest to these two is Sansa, who has 2,150% coefficient on her heal. So in terms of raw throughput, Daenerys is by far the best. Then it will be Marjorie. Daenerys specifically also has a 200 rage recovery attached to her active as well, which will help you cycle through both to get to your next active cast to get the effectiveness out of that, but perhaps more importantly in a Daenerys lineup, to help get back to using that Daenerys active once more, because if you have a gold Daenerys, you are going to want to be doing everything in your power to maximize that as much as possible. So it's going to want to be in your Lord lineup, it's going to want to be the chief commander of that Lord lineup, and you're going to want to attach synergy with it if possible, which will be Leila in particular, because if you get Leila to re-proc Daenerys active with its 6,000% scaling, that will theoretically be, if hitting maximum targets, 120 seconds worth of normal attacking, which is absurd. And this is why you will see huge accounts now in the state of Siege of Winterfell and All Out War just mowing down hordes of people regardless of pincer bonuses, because the AoE damage you're getting from Daenerys is just absolutely ridiculous. You can also exaggerate this further with Sanel and Cav lineups with Daenerys, Sanel, Leila will be by far and away the biggest Elim farmer in Siege of Winterfell and All Out War. The only thing that comes remotely close is Baelish, Patelo, Jaime with their multi-procking normal synergy, but it just doesn't have the AoE capacity that the Daenerys lineup will have. So Sanel, I can't actually see it at gold with my account because I only have her grey, but at gold she will give 180% additional skill damage dealt by that lineup for 8 seconds, and the fact it lasts 8 seconds means that if you have, say, her in 3rd position, it will then last through to Daenerys when she casts again in 1st position. So commander sequencing for Sanel Daenerys is potentially the most important sequencing of any two commanders in this game mode, because if you put Sanel in 2nd and your Daenerys is 1st, you're totally wasting that additional skill damage part of Sanel's ability, which is huge wasted potential. So even though she's big, she's fancy, she's sexy, not literally, don't send me to prison, please. You get my point? You're gonna want to use her as a means of exaggerating Daenerys more so than doing anything with her own ability. So she will want to be in 3rd position, and Daenerys will want to be in 1st position if you're running a Sanel Daenerys lineup. And then Leila, of course, will be in the middle because of her passive ability giving a chance for that Daenerys ability to reproc. And if you get a reproc Daenerys active with the Sanel buffs on her, you're pretty much just going to one-shot hordes of people. And if anyone is Elim chasing for those castle fragments, you are going to have to consistently be doing this if you want any hope of it realistically. Perhaps not with the Sanel, but with Leila Dany for sure. As I mentioned somewhere in that monologue, Baelish is potentially the only thing that can sort of compete with this because of how he interacts with Jaime. So again, I can't see his max values because he's at grey, but at gold, Baelish will give 180% additional normal attack damage for 5 seconds, and he will have a passive ability of giving a 40% chance to reproc normal attacks. So he has normal attack passive synergy, and Jaime also has that normal attack passive synergy. So if you're running a Jaime lineup, you're going to want to be doing everything to scale in attack stats of the lineup you're using, and also normal attack flat damage increases like Patelo and like Baelish. So Baelish will have a very high tier also. And I'd also say practically, Night King would be in this tier also. He's not as fun as the others because he actually does no damage. And again, I can't see his max ability. But at gold, this will be this ability, but for 3 seconds. So a total of 15 seconds applied of totally nullifying damage output from what you're hitting into. So 15 seconds of no normal attacks, no counter attacks, no skill damage. That is massive. He is just not a fun commander to run in that first slot realistically because he will do no damage, so he's not going to help you with elimination rankings or anything of the sort. But in terms of winning your alliance a giant brawl, the Night King will actually be incredible for that. I will then round out this A tier with Sandor. So, as expected, a lot of these are the most premium commanders in the game. The only one that isn't is Margaery. And as I stated previously, this isn't the best commanders in Siege of Winterfell. It's the best active abilities, at least in the context of these commanders being ran. But the fact that Margaery is standing up here with all these premium commanders, if you do have gold Margaery or even purple Margaery, she's one of the few commanders I would say is worth using at below gold rarity. That will be really, really great for you and your alliance because her active ability is just so insanely good. Sandor, though, he has the second highest damage scaling of any active ability in the game mode now. He has 1,350% scaling when he's at gold, and he'll also apply 50% flat damage reduction effectively because it hits all damage sources for 5 seconds. And that's generally just amazing, to be honest. Second best damaging ability in the game mode, and you halve the damage you take for 5 seconds, which leads you into the next active cast. So really, really solid there. Then we're pretty much moving past all the premium commanders now. Sansa, as I said previously, has actually the third highest scaling of any commanders in the entire game mode after Daenerys and then Margaery. So she has pretty much the exact same effect as Margaery does. She has a heal that hits 5 targets in an AoE, so think Simon in the previous iteration of Siege of Winterfell actives. It just has exactly half the value as Margaery's, but she is still very good. In free-to-play lineups, despite the fact she gives only bow stats now, I would honestly make quite a strong case for Sansa potentially being good for melee unit builds in that chief commander spot, just because of how good that active is. So, obviously not in your first or second lineup if you're getting Lord bonuses and you're getting kills of those lineups, but for say your third lineup, if you don't have any of these paid commanders, Sansa's active ability is the best you're going to get as a free-to-play player. So I would do your best to make use of that. I'd potentially compare it to something like Simon in the previous seasons, where the meta of Siege of Winterfell at the very top, and so if you're trying to win at least, was literally every person in your entire alliance running Simon as chief commander in one of the free lineups, just because his healing was insane. I don't think there's anything quite to that extent now, because Simon's healing scaling, I think, surpassed 10,000%, which was crazy, and you could do it with him at Grey. So that's very different now. Yes, Sansa is very, very good. Then I'm going to put 6 commanders down at once, and this is maybe the most relevant part of this video for most people watching. So with these new abilities, a lot of them have been normalized, and the equivalent commanders for each unit type, so say Rhea, Patelo, and Salma, all have the same ability, just for their own unit type. It's the same for Drake, Latz, and Enzo also. So there's a question to be made here, is if you're running, say, a Cav lineup, is Salma's active better, or is Enzo's active better, and which do you want in that first position? So the way I'm going to tier these is actually with the Salma, Rhea, and Patelo group in B tier, and then the Enzo, Latz, and Drake grouping just below it. Now the reason for this, I'm probably going to have to write on a notepad, and admittedly this is theoretical, because you can't actually look at Siege of Winterfell reports, so it's very hard to garner specific theory-crafted conclusions with stuff like this. But when you watch back videos of Siege of Winterfell, you will see that you normal attack once a second, or you'll get damage numbers once a second, so you can draw the conclusion from that you're doing probably 100% damage coefficient every second from normal attacks. So if we then do the maths of this, using the numbers here, Salma will apply a 5-second buff that increases normal attack damage by 90%, plus provide 1,800% cav attack, and then alternatively Enzo will give 625% as an instant damage effect, and a defense buff for 5 seconds. So we bring up a notepad. We're going to have to use 5 seconds as a damage period for this. So with Enzo, he'll have 500 from 5 times 100 for the normal attacks, plus his 65. So that will be 1,125% damage coefficient in 5 seconds. Salma will have her 500 from her normal attacks, but then it's times by 1.9 for the 90% increase on normal attacks. So that would go to 950% damage coefficient in 5 seconds. Then you're also including the 1,800% cavalry attack being added to that. And for most people, this is probably around doubling your cavalry attack if you're running mono cav. So if true, if already at 1,800% total cavalry attack, an additional 1.8k would equals 1,900% damage coefficient in 5 seconds. Because you're scaling multiple multipliers onto the normal attacks with Salma, and it just stretches a very long way compared to the instant damage source that Enzo has. So in terms of active abilities for mid-spender builds, the Salma, Patelo, Latz group is in a very good spot, and you're probably going to want to be building your lineups around that. If you're mixed formations with one of each melee unit type, just having Salma, Patelo, and Latz as your chief commanders in each lineup is honestly not a bad idea at all. And I know for sure this is quite hard to visualize, which is why I've written it out like this. Perhaps it makes you compare these two actives in a different way than you did before. Whilst I've been talking about the power of improving normal attack damage, I'll put Daeron next to them. Daeron, a lot of his effectiveness is tied up in his passive ability, but he will increase normal attack damage by 180% for 5 seconds, so that will have a fairly similar value to what Salma is bringing. Somewhere like that 2,000% damage coefficient from that active ability is probably a decent ballpark to envision this at. For the rest of the F5s, or the F8, I guess, I will put in C tier. So there's Cersei, there is Jon, and there's also Dana. Dana is very, very good, and if you can run her with Baelish Jaime, she's one of the top tier commanders in the game mode. But in terms of her active ability itself for sequencing, all it is a counterattack damage reduction, which is really meh. The bulk of her effectiveness is all tied up in that passive ability, which procs off crits, which you're going to be getting from Jaime. So she won't have a high priority in terms of commander sequencing at all. Cersei used to be the second highest damaging commander in Siege of Winterfell. She had all her damage stripped off her active with the new set of skills, and now at gold, all she'll give is a plus 50% damage increase and CC immunity for just her lineup for 4 seconds, which is really meh in my opinion. So you're increasing, say, your skill damage by 50%, but because it only lasts 4 seconds, it might as well be 0%, because you're never going to get the next skill from the next commander off in that 4 seconds. So it's just irrelevant. If she lasted, say, like 8 to 10 seconds, she'd be better. But 4 seconds, you can't do anything with that at all. Jon is a pure tank guy at gold. He will reduce normal attack damage taken by 50%, and it will also increase your counter damage dealt by 80%. I don't like this because it's just very conditional. Like, if you're not being attacked by a ton of people when this procs, he's useless. Like, if you're just chasing someone down, if you're attacking one guy, you could have so many better options than Jon. And for his price especially, that's just not worth it at all. Theon acts as the bow equivalent of these 3 commanders. I should have listed him earlier. Julien has quite a similar effect too. They both have, I believe, the 625 damage coefficient. Theon actually has 675, so slightly higher there. And Julien has 625. He'll increase the normal attack damage taken by the target 5 seconds also, so his active is actually a bit better than the likes of Enzo, Latz, and Drake, but his passive stats are worse. You can just go into any lineup. Realistically, I should probably order this as this, if we're reading from left to right. Seg actually has a good chunk of damage attached to him. He has 700% as a damage coefficient on his active ability, which you see here. And then I will also say Melisandre is probably in this tier also. Her active is really, really solid. So it hits 5 targets. Anything that hits 5 targets tends to be very good in this game mode, because it's just, the AoE is so effective. It actually gives 40% all damage reduction to allies in a circle for 5 seconds, which is similar to Night King, not sexy at all, but practically very, very, very good in my opinion. Then the tier below that, you have the enabler commanders, so Leila, Sinara, Jaime, who all give 1,800% attack for 5 seconds, as seen there. The bulk of their effectiveness is built into the passive abilities, but their actives are pretty decent by themselves also. Simon, if I can find him, again, it's an AoE that hits 5 allies. He'll go into this tier. And then to round this out, it will be Lareo, Uma, Winton, O'Bane. I'd also say, funnily enough, Soren. He is a surprisingly good active. Lareo, Uma, Winton, O'Bane are all the same. They are sort of toned down Latz, Drake, Enzos, where they do 350% damage coefficient as direct damage. They also have 5 seconds of 900% attack also. So it's damage on damage, which is very good. And Soren, he has a 650% coefficient heal, which isn't sexy at all, but it is quite high statted compared to other stuff, so I'm putting him there. Anything else, realistically, I don't think you should ever find yourself putting as the chief commander, ideally. Perhaps if you're free to play, you're going to have to stretch to some of these commanders down here. But when you look at their abilities, I mean, Mango could probably go in here with the 900% attack. The bulk of his effectiveness is built into that passive. Stuff like the Miranda equivalents, stuff like Varys and Sabrina, nothing just quite is good enough. Like, counterattack damage reduction for 5 seconds, it's very meh. You can run commanders like Hector for their stats, particularly, but you should never be building up your lineups to be built around Hector's active abilities specifically, and that is the point of this video. It's not about what commanders are best, it's about how do you want to sequence their active abilities when you actually pick them in a lineup. And whilst this tier list is unfinished, I think I'm going to leave it here as a general recommendation. If you're running monotype formations, so say 3 cav lineups, you might want to do your best to split the commanders on these high tiers into separate lineups so you keep the good active abilities spread out and you can have them in that chief commander spot more often. So you can have, if you're a whale, your Daenerys, Leila, Sanel lineup, and then maybe it'll be better for you to have Salma as the chief commander in one lineup and Enzo chief commander in the third lineup instead of keeping them together, because their actives will vastly surpass any of the alternatives you have left, and if you keep them together, you're potentially wasting whatever you don't put in that first slot, if that makes sense. I will continue to come out with a bunch more Siege of Winterfell content over the next week in terms of commander lineup, recommendations, and probably tier lists for each unit type, since most people tend to run mono in Siege of Winterfell now. And I'll end it all with going over a big spreadsheet of probably my recommended lineups for each spending bracket that people find themselves within when playing this game.